Hello, my name is Michael O'Donnell, and I'm the CEO of the Art and Science of Health Promotion Institute and the program chair of the Art and Science of Health Promotion Conference. And it's my pleasure to welcome you today to our conversation with Dr. Lynn Rossy on the topic of mindfulness, learning from the inside out. And I'd like to start by introducing Dr. Rossy. She is a clinical psychologist, and her bio will be coming up here in a second on the screen. She's really known internationally as an expert in the field of mindfulness, especially interventions for eating stress and also for integrating these concepts into workplace settings. She's been teaching mindfulness interventions for, I think it's more than 20 years now. She's an author of a book that was published in 2016 that was named one of the top 10 mindfulness books for the year, and it's titled The Mindfulness-Based Eating Solution: Proven Strategies to End Overeating, Satisfy Your Hunger, and Savor Your Life. She also has developed a 10-week course called Eat for Life, and it's based on mindful eating and has shown actually very good research results. She's vice president of the board for the Center for Mindful Eating. This is a nonprofit that trains professionals and educates the general public on this topic as well. She's also executive director of the Tasting Mindfulness organization, and this is a company that's dedicated to improving people's lives through the practice of mindfulness at work and at home. She's a teacher of mindfulness-based stress reduction. She's also a yoga teacher, teaching Kripula yoga, and a community Dharma leader. So with that, I'd like to welcome Dr. Lynn Rossy. She's going to be, I'd like everybody to know that she's going to be a speaker at the Art and Science of Health Motion Conference, which is going to be the last week of March in San Diego. She's going to be teaching a 2-day intensive training seminar on mindfulness, and then also has a session in the core conference. So with that, Dr. Rossy, good to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
And this is going to be an informal discussion. I'm going to pose some questions, and then Dr. Rossy will answer. If anybody has a question, you can type it in the question box on the webinar, go to webinar control panel, and then I'll also draw in those questions. So I know, Lynn, that for at least the last 2 decades, you've been focusing a lot of your creative energy on this whole idea of mindfulness. And if you could just give us a quick definition of mindfulness and tell us why it's so important.
Sure. Mindfulness is really it's a practice of focusing your attention on the present moment. Noting what you're seeing, what you're tasting, what you're touching, what you're feeling, knowing what's happening on the outside and on the inside of your body as well, with a certain quality of attention. So we want to bring in qualities of kindness and compassion and non-judgment to what the present offers us. And we do that without clinging to it or rejecting it. So it's really about being in the present moment with openness and acceptance. And it's important because, well, most of us aren't living in the present quite a bit of the time. And when we're not present, all kinds of things can happen, like we don't make the best choices, and we're kind of lost in thought, and thinking about the past or thinking about the future, and we're not really living fully in the present moment and really accessing all the pleasure that's here, as well as learning how to deal with the things that aren't so pleasant. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Very good. And let me ask you, is our knowledge about mindfulness based primarily from practice or from research? Is there a solid science base here, or is it mainly what people have learned sort of by experience?
Well, I mean, certainly there's been thousands of years of experience of people practicing mindfulness practices. And a lot of that anecdotal evidence that mindfulness is beneficial in one's life has been around for a long time. But the really wonderful thing is that there's been, 3 decades of research and thousands of studies on mindfulness-based interventions that have shown that people benefit from all kinds of things. Like my research shows that people don't overeat as much. Other research has shown that people also benefit in all kinds of psychological and physical ways, getting better sleep, lowering their blood pressure, having more attention and focus, being more creative, having better relationships. And so these research findings have been very compelling. And so mindfulness-based interventions have really gotten, a good footing in the world, really around the world. Mindfulness-based interventions are being conducted in every imaginable setting, from all the way from preschool to graduate school to athletics to law schools to prisons to, you name it, and mindfulness is being taught there. Some of the most fascinating research, though, I think, if you go beyond the self-help or the research that looks at the self-report data, if you look at the underlying physiological changes that take place when somebody practices mindfulness, I think that's some of our most compelling research, because you can, self-report data is great, but if you can look at, for instance, data that looks at the brain, so fMRI data of people who've practiced mindfulness for either short periods or long periods of time, you can see the changes in the brain that are associated with mindfulness practice. So I think that's some of the most kind of interesting research. So we can see that, for instance, a lot of cognitive benefits, greater attention and focus, better executive functioning, more compassion, more empathy. These parts of the brain that light up that are associated with these things are being found in people that meditate. Starting like with Sarah Lazar out of Harvard, she showed that people that meditate have less cortical thinning. And we know that as you age, we get thinning in the brain that's related to cognitive decline. And so that doesn't happen in people that practice regularly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So I heard you say a couple things. One, that these techniques have been practiced for thousands of years.
Right.
And then just in the last 30 years or so, we've really started to study it. And we've moved beyond self-report to really testing, especially in the area of physiology. So I know that learning mindfulness skills takes time, and I don't want to minimize the effort involved, but could you give us like a 3-minute primer on how to do it? If you were teaching somebody and you had to summarize it in 3 minutes, what would you say? The how-to.
Well, why don't we practice it?
Okay.
That would even be better.
All right. I'm ready.
Okay, is everybody ready? So we're going to do a short, what I call a taste of mindfulness, and it'll give you a little bit of sense of what mindfulness is. So if everybody wants to just start by sitting in a comfortable position, or standing in a comfortable position, or lying in a comfortable position, and closing your eyes and letting your attention come down into your body. So notice what your body feels like, just scanning it from head to toe. Notice places in your body that might feel tight or tense. Notice places in your body that feel relaxed. And just bringing a kind of curious, kind attention to your body. Not needing to change anything, but just being aware without judgment of what your body feels like in this moment. You might also notice as you scan the body that the belly is maybe hungry. It's about time to eat, or you might have already eaten and your belly might feel full. And so noticing that, and noticing that the belly is moving in response to the breath. And so once you've checked in with the body and know how the body feels, why don't you check in and see, if you would, what you're feeling and what you're thinking. Just a little quick snapshot of, are you feeling happy or sad or curious or bored or interested? See if you can name a feeling that you're having and a thought that is associated with that. So when we know what the body feels like and what we're thinking and what we're feeling, we've dropped out of automatic pilot. Now gather your attention and simply bring it to the breath. Be with an entire duration of the in-breath, the entire duration of an out-breath, not needing to change the breath in any way, but just experiencing the breath directly as the movement of the belly or the chest, or the air moving in and out of the nostrils. And when your mind wanders away, which it might have already, simply notice and bring your attention back to the breath. That wandering and noticing and bringing yourself back is the practice of strengthening your mindfulness. So the fact that your mind wandered is not a problem, it's just part of the practice. Just keep coming back over and over again to the gentle breath coming in and out of your body. And then expanding your awareness again to include the entire body and the breath within the body. Just a nice, spacious, open awareness of just sitting and breathing and being. And then when you're ready, opening your eyes and noticing how you feel. So that would be how I would introduce people to mindfulness.
Well, that was
What did you notice, Michael?
well, it was really very relaxing, and I found myself going in and out. I found myself I thought, okay, I have to come back to this webinar and make sure we're on time and make sure I keep it in. So I found myself sort of, as you said, as you notice yourself drifting, in and out of being just focusing on your body. The thing that really pulled me back every time was the breath. When I focused on my breath, I found that regardless of anything else in my mind, I could really just focus on the breath and not worry about coming back to the webinar. But it did make me think of a question. I'm responsible here. I'm responsible to the people on the call and to you. And so I couldn't just completely let go. When should we do this? When should we take that time for ourselves to do it? Should we do it when we've got some isolated time, or should we do it when we're involved in something very important?
Well, so your position is kind of unique because you are running the webinar.
Right.
So probably that wouldn't be the ideal time unless you had somebody like me who knew we have a time schedule that was taking you through that. So that would have been about, maybe trusting me to not go on forever. But anyway, so there's a lot of times that you can do meditation, and meditation is actually done in a couple of different ways. So there's the formal periods of practice where you set aside time to do something like focus on the breath. That's a common meditation practice, particularly for beginners, because the breath is our anchor to the present moment, and it begins to develop that attention and focus that you actually need for mindfulness practice, which is really more of an open awareness of whatever is happening. But focusing on the breath or the breath and the body, which are always in the present moment, is a good way to start. So setting aside some time, let's say in the morning before you go to work, or maybe on your break at work. That's one of the things that I really recommend for people at work, is those mid-morning breaks or mid-afternoon breaks are perfect times to go and find a conference room or find an office where you can meditate for a few minutes. And I even recommend and help people set up meditation breaks at work so that you can do it at work. It's a perfect way to really re-engage your brain, is by doing these practices during the workday, right? Don't wait until you're gone and you're off doing something else. You really need your brain engaged at work, and so doing these things during the workday is great. Also, one of the ways that we can practice mindfulness is just simply a more informal way of practicing, which is bringing your attention to whatever it is that you're doing. So for instance, right now, I hope I'm your object of mindfulness, and because you're listening to me, right? So whoever we're listening to can be your object of mindfulness. Your mind wanders away, you bring it back. Your mind wanders away, you bring it back. Listening is one of the most important skills that we can have at work, and yet our minds are so scattered that we often miss a lot of things because we're not paying attention, right? And so this is just a really easy way of weaving it into your workday. You can also just pay attention to walking from your car to the door. You can pay attention to, in the morning, taking a shower or fixing a cup of tea or drinking a cup of tea, or any routine activity can be something that you bring your mindfulness to, right? So you can begin to weave it into every aspect of your life, because that's when it's going to, be important for you.
Okay, great. And by the way, you did ask, how did that feel? And several people, including Katya Daragan, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Katya, she said, I felt much calmer, peaceful after the exercise. Thank you. And then also, Doug Newton's asked about the course. And I think maybe if we tell people your website address, the information is on the website and they could find out more about it. So tell us what is your website address?
Oh, yes. So it's lynnrossy.com. So it's LYNNROSSY.com.
Okay, great. And so, Lynn, what are some of the misconceptions about mindfulness and meditation?
Well, okay. So some of the misconceptions, you kind of already spoke to some of them. One of them is I can't meditate because my mind wanders, right? That's a big one. So everybody's mind is busy, right? My mind is busy, and I've been practicing for years. It might not be as busy now as it used to be, but depending on the day and the circumstance, my mind is going to be wandering. Everybody's mind does that. The practice is really about just noticing and then bringing your attention back. Every time you bring your attention back, you're strengthening that mindfulness muscle, right? It's like going to the gym for your mind. You can think about it that way, right? And you have to do it regularly, just like you build your muscle strength up regularly. You have to do this practice on a regular basis in order for it to be effective.
How regularly? How often?
Every day, right? So consistency is more important than length of time. Right. So even if you would do 5 minutes a day to start, right? And there's a great, I like this one app. It's called Insight Timer. And I have some meditations on there as well. And I have meditations on my website, by the way, so you can download them for free, from everything from a 2-minute to a 30-minute meditation. Right. And so, just do something every day. So you begin to build that into your daily routine. Right. And so it's something that you don't even think about, you just do, right? And in fact, people who tell me they don't have time to meditate, those are the people that I say to them, you don't have time not to, right? Because when you meditate and you take time out of your day to meditate, you actually create more time, right? Because you're going to be more present for your life. And when you're paying attention, you get more done. Right? So taking some time to practice some mindfulness gives you back time and more. So it's a really great thing to do.
Kind of like exercise.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
Go ahead.
I want to jump to some of the questions from the participants.
Oh, sure.
So Jill Corrigan asks, are there CEUs offered for this class or a certification of attendance? And for the intensive training seminar at the conference, there's definitely CEUs. What about your course that you offer? Are there CEUs in any way?
Yes. Yeah. So, oh my goodness. Sorry. People can get CEUs for the hours they spend in the class. Yes, I've got a company that offers CEUs for that.
Okay, good.
Mhm.
And then Ann Rowlands asked, what is cognitive spinning? Do you know what that is?
Cognitive spinning.
I guess I wondered if that was something you had mentioned, but I guess not.
No, I don't know what that is.
Okay. And then Swati Patel says, we're students teaching mindfulness at a university, and we're wondering how you would suggest we help our students create a meditation tailored specifically for the individual throughout the day. Any insights you can offer on that?
I'm sorry, can you read the question again? We're
Sure.
students that are teaching mindfulness at a university.
Yep. So, how would you suggest our students create a meditation tailored specifically for the individual throughout the day?
Well, I really do think that the meditation with a focus on the breath and the body is such a wonderful practice. And I think that that is a good one for, and you can even do that not with your eyes closed. You can do that walking around. If you would just bring your attention to your breath and your body and become embodied in your, you become embodied in your life that way, right? So I don't know if you're talking about formal practice or informal practice, but either one, I would say focus on the breath and the body and be aware. The body has so many amazing messages to give us. And, you know, I mean, I teach mindful eating, and of course it's important in that, but it's also important because the body tells us when it needs rest. It tells us when it needs to go around and walk around the block and get some fresh air. It tells us, you know, all kinds of things, but we don't pay attention because mostly we're looking at our cell phones, you know. And so it's a good way of like getting away from your cell phone and just checking in with yourself, visiting. I call it visiting yourself, right? We think about visiting others, you know, through our cell phones or in other methods, but we really need to think about visiting ourselves. I read some statistics actually recently that said that young people look at their cell phones 95 times a day on
Wow,
average.
I believe it.
That's huge. And so
Yeah.
what if you just spend a few of those times just checking every time you, okay, here's the deal. Before you go on to your, check your cell phone or your Facebook, whatever it is, before you do that, if you would just check in with one breath in and one breath out and feel your body. Wow,
So,
what a
so
difference that
when,
would make.
so when I'm thinking about I need to check my cell phone, that's my cue. Okay, take one
Yes,
breath in, one breath out. So the cell phone becomes help in helping us remember to do that.
yes, that would be awesome. That would be
So,
great.
Amy asked, you mentioned your work in mindful eating. Amy Wolf says, what are some mindful eating pointers?
Mindful eating pointers. Well, in my book, I talk about this whole basics of mindful eating, which is an acronym, and but I won't go through all of them. But the idea is to be aware before you eat. Are you hungry? This in itself is profound for people. People don't eat when they're hungry. They eat because it's 12 o'clock, or they eat because there's food around, or they eat because they're stressed, or they eat because they're bored. How about starting off by eating mainly when you're hungry and not eating when you're not hungry? That would change the way most people eat right there, right? And then really pay attention to what are you putting into your body, right? Before you do that, is it something that you really want to put into your body? Make that determination. And then while you're eating, make sure that you're tuning into how does it taste? Does it taste good? You know, how much of it does your body want? Make sure that you're chewing it, you know, thoroughly so that the body can digest the food. And then, you know, really savoring the experience. So I think it's, and then after you've eaten, notice how did that feel? You know, is that something that I want to repeat anytime in the near future? Because what happens is when people come to my mindful eating class is that oftentimes people discover they don't like a lot of the food that they eat, but they just hadn't noticed before, which I think is just really interesting.
And we could go on that topic, but I'm going to jump to the workplace. And there's several questions related to
Mm-hmm.
the workplace. I'm going to read several of them. So Lauren Zuniga says, what is the best way to introduce mindfulness into the workplace? And then Tom German says, that he promotes mindful meditation in the workplace, but often he's told that he's religious, and maybe that's something that shouldn't be in the workplace. So how do you, what are the best ways to start to integrate these ideas into the workplace, and how do you respond to people who say, this is religious and you shouldn't do it here?
Okay, these are great questions. Thanks so much for asking them. I've been doing bringing mindfulness to the workplace since 1999. And believe me, nobody knew what mindfulness was when I first started doing it at all. And so I had a lot of explaining to do, and I got a lot of pushback here and there, but I also had some really good supporters, which was helpful. But here's what I did, and I think it's so important, is that we have to introduce mindfulness into the workplace based on the research that's been done. There are 3 decades of research showing the benefits of mindfulness. So I would really put together your resources and put together the science that proves that this is a crucial practice for improving workplace wellness and workplace productivity and just, employees' happiness and well-being. Right? So really rely on the science, go back to the science and really lead with the science. The science is there to support you. And that's why it's so wonderful that we've been doing it. It is not a religious practice. We don't talk about anything religious when we're doing it. It's simply paying attention to the present moment. There's always going to be people that are going to be maybe not as excited about it because they don't understand. But what I have found is it's because people don't understand it. So find the people that will partner with you. This is what I've always done, is find the people that will partner with you. And there are plenty of people out there. There are people that are scrambling to have something to help them, live their lives, easier and healthier. In fact, I was just reading some research that said one in every 7 employees is practicing some kind of mindfulness at work. And
Wow.
it's just crazy. It was an amazing statistic. And that was like 5 years ago. So there are plenty of people out there that will be anxious to do this with you and really want to do this with you. So find the people that you can partner with and then start small, and then gradually it begins to build, and pretty soon it just takes over. I just finished a year at a company here in Columbia, and they wanted me to bring mindfulness into their workplace. And there are people that don't want to, participate, and that's fine. But there was tons of people that did, and the numbers keep growing. So find the people, like I said, that you can partner with, lead with the science. I think that answers the question.
Yeah, that's very helpful.
Yeah.
So the name of the app, several people asked, Insight Timer, is that what it
Yeah.
is?
Yes.
Good. And then I'd like to ask you a question that's related to our conference and this topic.
Mm-hmm.
The theme of our conference is best science plus expert implementation equals best outcomes. And then the question that this really spawns is, how do we meld scientific knowledge with human sensitivity and expert management to produce the best health outcomes? Now, how does that apply to mindfulness? As you think about,
It really does. It really
yeah,
does. And so mindfulness is so popular these days that there's so many people wanting to jump on the mindfulness bandwagon, right? And offer it to their employees and, all other kinds of settings. But you have to really be careful, and whoever is offering the mindfulness trainings needs to systematically train in mindfulness, right? It takes a great deal of personal training and experience to really understand mindfulness in your own life, and then you teach it to others. I think that people sometimes are skipping over the learning it for themselves and wanting to offer it when there's not a clear understanding. There's a huge body of scientific literature to read and understand. And many of the mindfulness interventions have been manualized, and there are certification programs that have been put into place that verifies the skill of these teachers. So science and expert implementation come together in the field of mindfulness in this way. And so we need to make sure that the guidelines that have been put into place are understood and respected, right? Otherwise you get a kind of mindfulness light. That's probably not going to be all that helpful,
okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we have to begin to pull toward the end of this webinar. I do want to remind everybody that Dr. Rossy will be speaking at our conference the last week of March, and both an intensive training seminar and then also a session in the core conference. And for everybody who's registered for the conference, we have recorded this webinar, and it'll be sent to you by the end of the week. So thank you, everybody, for joining us, and hope to see you in San Diego. Bye-bye.
Bye.